Okay, we will now start with the Honorable Mr. Werfel. Thank you very much for being with us today. You're a controller of the Office of the Federal Financial Management for the Office of OMB, and you're recognized for an opening statement.
Thank you, Congressman Burton.
Oh, excuse me, one thing. We have to have you rise so we can swear you in. Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the true self, God? Okay.
Again, thank you, Congressman Burton, Chairman Issa, Ranking Member Cummings, and members of the committee for the invitation to discuss the status of Federal Inspector General leadership with you today. The IG community plays an integral role in enhancing financial stewardship and accountability across the Federal Government. Through audits, investigations, evaluations, and inspections, the IG community provides critical analysis and oversight that strengthens program integrity, helps to eliminate waste, and holds our Federal projects and programs accountable to the public. In this era of fiscal constraints, the role of the IG is more important than ever in helping agency leadership identify and address management challenges and maximize the impact of our limited Federal resources. By way of background, the central role of the IG dates back to the passage of the Inspector General Act of 1978, over 34 years ago. The IG Act established the offices of Inspector General within Federal agencies to conduct and supervise audits and investigations in agency programs and to provide leadership and coordination for activities designed to promote economy, efficiency, and effectiveness and prevent and detect fraud and abuse. More recently, the IG Reform Act of 2008 established the SIGI, which is charged with, among other things, identifying, reviewing, and discussing areas of weakness and vulnerability in Federal programs and operations with respect to fraud, waste, and abuse, and developing plans for coordinated government-wide activities that address these areas. Under the Reform Act, the OMB Deputy Director for Management serves as the executive chairperson of the SIGI, focused on facilitating the exchange of information between SIGI and the agencies represented on it. However, this role is properly limited given the importance of preserving the independence of the IGs and the SIGI. That independence is one of the most central and crucial qualities of the IGs, allowing them to report objectively and directly to their agency heads on potential areas of concern or deficiency. And critical to this independence is the expertise and dedication of the civil servants that support the IGs, armed with extensive and diverse expertise in areas such as accounting, auditing, law, management analysis, program analysis, public administration, and investigations. This administration remains committed to supporting the work of the IG community while respecting its independence. Beyond supporting the IGs, their indispensable work in safeguarding and overseeing taxpayer funds is consistent with a core commitment of this administration to make the Federal Government more transparent and accountable to the American people than ever before. As dedicated stewards of the taxpayer dollars, the Government has a responsibility to provide information to the public on how Federal funds are being spent and to work tirelessly to root out and prevent waste, fraud, and abuse in Federal programs. Working with the IG community over the past 3 years, we have made tremendous strides towards these goals and worked together to create a more efficient, effective, and accountable government across a number of areas. In the area of technology, the IG community has examined multiple facets of government-wide IT operations, complementing the administration's efforts to close over 1,000 data centers by the end of 2015, and in establishing the TechStat program, which has resulted in approximately $4 billion worth of savings and cost reductions in IT investments. In the area of audit and financial management, this year, for the first time since the passage of the Chief Financial Officers Act over 20 years ago, 23 of the 24 applicable agencies obtained an opinion from independent auditors on their financial statements, and all but 2 of those opinions were clean. In contracting, the IGs have put a spotlight on suspensions and debarments. Where appropriate, agencies have done the same. Armed with this new tool, the Federal Awardee Performance and Integrity Information System, or FAPIS, to provide broadened access to information about the integrity of contractors, agencies are making better use of suspension and debarment authorities to ensure that contractors are playing by the rules and have the requisite integrity and business ethics to do business with the Government. As a final example, there is the area of improper payments, a leading priority in the administration's campaign to cut waste. Over the past 2 years, the Federal Government has avoided $20 billion in payment errors by driving the improper payment rate down in Medicare, Medicaid, Pell Grants, SNAP, and other critical assistance programs. To complement our efforts, in March of this year, the IGs completed the first-ever review of agencies' efforts to reduce improper payments and provided critical recommendations that will help continued progress in this area. Overall, IGs have made significant contributions in overseeing and improving the Federal Government's performance and accountability over the past 34 years, and I am confident they will continue to do so. In these challenging fiscal times, the Administration recognizes the importance of maintaining a strong, independent role for IGs, and we look forward to continuing to work with the IG community to promote financial stewardship and accountability across the Federal Government. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Werfel. As I understand it, you and Mr. Zentz are responsible to coordinate between various controllers or investigators in the government. Is that correct?
We have somewhat of a limited role on the Council of IGs. We play more of an administrative role under the IG Reform Act. The sweet spot for the role of OMB, myself, and Acting Director Zients is to work with the Inspector General community to understand what they're seeing, what trends they're seeing, what findings they're leading to help inform OMB on the right policies to issue across government to help deal with those issues. That's the primary focus of our work with the IGs, is to learn from one another about how we can strategize as OMB to coordinate cross-government activities, and the IGs can learn from us in terms of what we're seeing so that they can focus their investigations appropriately.
Let me ask you a question. Mr. Zentz is the acting head of OMB, right?
That is correct.
Why hasn't the administration sent his name up for confirmation, or have they?
At this time, I do not believe that his name has been submitted for nomination. I'm unaware of the circumstances surrounding that issue.
Do you know how long it's been since his name's been submitted?
Again, I do not believe his name has been submitted. I do know that I believe that he became the acting director in January of 2012.
And the State Department has an acting Inspector General.
Yes, that is correct.
The thing I can't understand is the President makes a recommendation to the Senate, and the Senate reviews that, the proper committees, and then they either confirm him, the full Senate, or they reject them. The Senate does not have the opportunity to rule on that or to make a judgment unless it's submitted to them. I just don't understand why, at this point, we still have these people that are in acting positions after 3.5 years. I'm not sure you can answer that question because you're in a coordinating capacity, as I understand it. But it just seems to me that the responsibility that is required by the Constitution and the confirmation process is circumvented when the President has an acting director of any of these agencies for a long period of time. Do you have any idea, and I don't know if you do or not, do you have any idea how many acting directors we have of various agencies right now besides these two?
In terms of Inspector General?
Inspector Generals or OMB or anything else?
Well, because in preparing for this hearing, I was able to review the data and the information. I think as was reported on the first panel, there are across the entire IG community, which is made up of 73 total Federal statutory IGs, there are currently 10 vacancies, and I believe there's an acting IG in each of those vacancies.
Sure. And I'm sure that the acting IGs are doing a good job. It's just that you know, Harry Truman had a sign on his desk. It said, "The buck stops here." And if somebody is a temporary or non-confirmed person, it seems to me that the buck doesn't get to the top guy. once the President sends somebody up for confirmation and is confirmed, then the responsibility for that appointment rests with the President. And so I would, as I said before, I would urge the President or any President to move as quickly as possible on moving toward the confirmation process and making the appointment as quickly as possible. I'm not sure I have any other questions for you right now other than what I've already asked, and that is why the administration has taken so long, particularly on the IG that deals with the State Department. I mean, the amount of money the President is asking for $8.2 billion in extraordinary and temporary funding in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and this comes on top of $43.4 billion proposed for the core budget for the State Department, USAID, which manages foreign aid. And so all this money is being requested, and we're going to have to act to make sure that those funds are there for those purposes. But I know for one, and I think the Chairman feels the same way, we'd like to have a permanent IG and other appointees as quickly as possible and not wait 3.5 years. And I'm not saying this just because of President Obama. I'm saying this for any president. And there have been other presidents that have delayed and delayed, and they shouldn't do that. Does the gentlelady have any questions?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I guess, Mr. Werfel, I'm kind of confused. The Office of Management and Budget, what role do they have in terms of appointing inspectors general?
Oh, we do, Congresswoman, we do not have a role in that process. OMB, there is a process that was described in the first panel in which the CIGI, or the Council of Inspector Generals, has a committee that submits names for consideration to the appointing official, which in this case is the President. OMB does not participate on that committee. And then once those names are submitted, they're submitted into a personnel process within the White House, again, a process that OMB does not participate in. We, as I've mentioned, play a substantive role in helping both coordinate Inspector General activities and working together in terms of analyzing both patterns and trends across government and how to work collectively to root out fraud, error, and waste. But in the specific narrow point of the hiring and the appointments process, for that, OMB does not play a role.
So the purpose of this hearing is to discuss the appointments process and why it's taking too long in certain departments. So you have no role, your office has no role in that?
That is correct.
So why do you think you're here?
I think I'm here because the way the Inspector General Reform Act operates, there is—
You don't have to answer that question.
Okay.
It was more rhetorical
Okay.
than anything else. Let me ask you, though, since you are here, you were confirmed by the Senate as Controller for the Office of Management and Budget.
Correct.
And for a period of time, you were acting Controller.
That is correct.
Did you feel that you were doing any less of a job because you were acting during part of that time?
No, I do not.
Was your authority at all diminished?
From my personal experience, no.
Now, as acting Controller, you helped the administration achieve record levels of openness and accountability throughout the Federal Government. So how successful would you say the administration has been at fostering openness and transparency in the Federal Government?
I think it's been a remarkable set of accomplishments that I don't think get sufficient attention. You point to something like the Recovery Act. That law was enacted and demanded a set of accountability and transparency that the government had not seen before. It required information to be reported out to the public on spending of taxpayer dollars at a timeliness and level of detail that had been seen before, and it required us to, in very quick order, develop IT solutions, data definitions, coordinate across multiple stakeholders, both grantees, contractors, and a whole host of recipients, to make those very, very tough demands that both Congress and the President put on the Federal Government to make the Recovery Act the most transparent bill that's ever been enacted. It was a historic effort and really set a new bar for the manner in which the public has transparency into where Federal dollars are going.
Now, I, like the majority, am troubled that the IG has not yet been appointed in State, and I hope that that appointment is made soon. But I think it's important to state for the record that the work of the IG's office within State continues unabated. And in fact, if I am not mistaken, the budget of the IG's office in State has more than doubled from $31 million during President Bush's term to $65 million under President Obama's term. So would you say that the office has the resources it needs to get the job done?
Congresswoman, I'm glad you raised the question. From my vantage point and where I sit at OMB in my work with the Inspector General, and I have a very close working relationship with Ms. Fong, there are a variety of different areas where OMB is in a position to help the IG community succeed. One of them is to work with them to better understand the resource needs of the Inspector General community and to work with them to develop justifications that can survive congressional scrutiny for the levels that the President requests for the IGs. I would note as a global matter that while the President, working with Congress, has cut essentially $1 trillion in discretionary resources in the budget, the IG community funding level has remained constant, has been across the IGs, and has been somewhat protected from the other discretionary cuts that we're seeing. Specific to the State Department, the State Department's enacted level in fiscal year 2011 was $59 million. In 12, that went up to $62 million, and the President's budget request for 2013 is $66 million. This is the place where OMB can step in and assist an IG in being as successful as possible in understanding what that resource calibration needs to be. I will add as a final point, from where I sit, I think that the Inspector General community is as healthy and as strong as I've ever seen it in my 15-year career at the Office of Management and Budget, and I have not detected in any way, shape, or form any diminution of those roles or responsibilities or impact when there's an acting IG in place.
Thank you. My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let me, my colleague, would you have any questions?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd ask for unanimous consent that my full statement be entered in the record at this point.
Without objection.
I thank the Chair. Welcome, Mr. Werfel. How long have you been in government, Mr. Werfel?
15 years.
15 years. Do you think we've made public service more and more attractive by the day?
It's a challenging time to be a Federal employee. I have two reactions to that question. On the one hand, I feel that the challenges our country faces have never been more critical and never been more important. When I go to sleep at night, I think about the immense challenge that the Federal workforce has before it and how important that work is, and it's motivating and energizing to know that when you're serving your country by serving the Federal Government, that has real meaning and purpose, and it can be a truly motivating factor. At the same time, it's important that we are investing in our people effectively, and by doing that, recognizing the great work that they're doing, recognizing the important role that they play, and there are circumstances in which sometimes the Federal employee can be the punching bag.
Well, let me just ask about that. I mean, do you think that an unrelenting verbal assault in the form of disparagement about the value of public service, about what Federal employees do, about the Federal workplace itself, coupled with a 2-year pay freeze and the proposal of an additional 3-year pay freeze, and changing the terms of pension, making it less attractive by requiring more upfront payment and fewer benefits at the other end for prospective employees to fund an unrelated piece of legislation, in this case unemployment insurance, and then asking another one for current employees, same thing, to fund an unrelated piece of legislation, transit funding. And now this committee, just the other day, marked up its piece of the reconciliation, which will cost Federal employees something of the order of magnitude of $78, $79 billion. That, combined with hearings, sometimes entitled, "Is the Federal Government Too Big and Bloated? Are Federal workers inefficient and incompetent? Doesn't GSA's recent excess in a Western Division conference sort of characterize what we're saying, that all Federal employees are kind of like that?" Might that have anything to do with morale and our ability to recruit and retain skilled workers such as, oh, I don't know, IGs, for example?
Congressman, I think a couple of reactions. One, the President has asked the Federal workforce to join others around the country in tightening their belts and making certain sacrifices given the economic challenges that we have. And time and again, the Federal workforce has reacted and absorbed that belt tightening in a manner that I think we can all be proud of in terms of still staying focused and passionate about what we do. I think the President wants to make sure that any approach we have is balanced, any approach we take towards deficit reduction is balanced, and that we're not riding the entire cost on the backs of one segment of the country. With respect to your question about morale, it is really, really important for a healthy and sustainable Federal government, Federal workforce, and carrying out all the critical services that we do to make sure that we are recruiting effectively and we're attracting talented and effective people into the Federal workforce. So I understand your questions and I appreciate them. I agree that it's very important that we recognize Federal workers for their contributions and that we don't disparage them unnecessarily, in particular if there's an isolated incident that raises the type of concerns that occur.
And I have one more question I'm going to sneak in that's a follow-up to something the Chairman said in his statement, with which I agree, and that has to do with maybe highlighting the dysfunction of the Senate as part of the problem here. We had one IG who was totally uncontroversial, Michael Horowitz at DOJ, and it took 8 months to get his confirmation through. And in looking at the record, roughly the number of vacancies in IG offices right now are comparable to the number of vacancies in 2004 as President Bush was gearing up for his reelection. And I think that perhaps suggests something about how onerous and difficult the Senate process has become, as the Chairman suggested. If the Chairman will indulge, I just want to give the witness an opportunity to answer that, and I'm done.
Do you have any comments disparaging the Senate?
I do not have any comments. On a personal level, they confirmed me pretty quickly, so I'm very appreciative of the Senate. The only thing I would remark is I would go back to Ms. Fang's remarks in the first panel in which she talked about the complexity of the process of bringing an IG on board. There's obviously the Senate process. There's the desire to find highly qualified individuals. And so it's a complex terrain and one in which probably should be evaluated over time.
Thank you. I'll recognize myself for more or less one question.
Please.
First panel, to my pleasure, congratulated us for passing on a bipartisan basis the DATA Act. The DATA Act is fairly extensive. OMB has not been the greatest proponent of it under you and your predecessor. One of the questions is, do you have any concerns you'd like to share with us today? Obviously, Senator Warner, Mark Warner in the Senate, is the lead sponsor of an identical bill. The Vice President has been very supportive and been part of it at every point. Chairman Devaney has been part of it. I want to put you on the spot a little. I think Mr. Connolly did a good job of going completely off of the first panel's discussion brilliantly. And I'd like to do that because I think the DATA Act deserves an understanding, if you're prepared to make comments on challenges you see, if any, that need to be addressed.
Thank you, Chairman. I will make a couple of remarks about that in response to your question. I'd like to first caveat my remarks by saying that we're reviewing the bill. The process to review the bill involves getting input from every agency and from a diverse segment within each agency, including lawyers and accountants and IT
You can let the
experts.
accountants in. The lawyers worry me.
Well, we're evaluating, and we will certainly be able to present to you a comprehensive reaction of both what we find as promising and areas where we think more work is needed. Let me also emphasize up front, before I go into the specifics, that the President and the Administration are in complete agreement with the objective of advancing transparency and accountability. The President played a critical role in that when he served in Congress on the Senate and co-sponsored the Transparency Act, a bill that really had a monumental impact in thinking about Federal transparency, and one in which we're continuing to execute on today. I raised that because, and there's a variety of different other bills that we're executing on today that the President has signed and supported, like the GIPRA modernization bill as an example, and I already mentioned the Recovery Act earlier. We continue to execute on these various transparency bills, and in doing so, we're investing in technologies, in new solutions, in growing our Federal workforce to understand better how to raise their game in terms of transparency. And all those activities are ongoing, and I want to make sure that people understand that we're not starting from scratch. We're starting with a very important foundation that has been built in advancing transparency. There's more information out there on websites like usaspending.gov and recovery.gov and where our Federal dollars are going than ever in the nation's history, and I think that's an important starting point. Now, with respect to the DATA Act.
And by the way, we would agree with you, particularly as to recovery, which is really the only site I know of that has recipient reporting in a verifiable way.
It's really transformative, and we're proud of the work that we did together with the Recovery Board and Chairman Devaney in achieving some of the results there. We're ready. The final caveat is we're ready to roll up our sleeves and work with this committee and with Congress on solutions that can further advance these important goals of transparency and accountability. And while we'll get you a more comprehensive view on the DATA Act, I think there's some important questions that I would raise, and you asked me about concerns, so I'll start there. A first concern would be the DATA Act, as I understand it, would create a new commission. And the question that we have is, in a time where government is looking to streamline the complexity of our bureaucracy, is the way to move forward in enabling transparency is to add an additional layer of potential bureaucracy by creating a new organization. And it's not just that that organization would exist and make government bigger. It's the fact that that organization would have regulatory authority to issue standards. And now, as I'm a recipient, already challenged by the complexity of having OMB requirements and agency requirements, and we work hard to try to dovetail those together in an effective way. Now you've added potentially a third entity.
Well, let me just stop you for a second, because I think that's a good point. And it's been one of the potential criticisms, along with pushback from those who would have to report, who currently receive the money and have less transparency because they don't actually have to tell us where they spent it. But the reason for the commission in the bill as it stands now is very straightforward. You haven't done your job. If you look at the transparency created, well, OMB had the authority to bring groups together, to provide the common standard, to make it all happen. The authority already was there. Congress, to a certain extent, is saying you can only wait so long with people saying we're going to do it. When you have a situation, as all of us on the dais, because most of us, beyond even the people here today, we were here for the beginning of Recovery Act. Chairman Towns was critical in ensuring that there was greater transparency and helping us ensure even that there was a portion of the Act that was earmarked for investigations and reporting, where initially we were just sending the money and then not giving them an unfunded mandate. So all of that we went through. The point is, Chairman Devaney and the Recovery Act showed us something that was a good model. We added on to it some other reforms, but at the end of the day, we believe that the reason that his model didn't spread throughout the government is that this administration and this government, including career professionals who work for and with you, simply have a lethargic view toward making this transition. Now, some of it may be that it's very hard to tell career people at all these agencies, you got to do it. My view would be any bureaucracy that accomplishes its goal, if you then want to reorganize to eliminate it because it now can be taken on by consolidation, that's great. But I would propose to you that Senator Warner and myself are pretty strong, along with my ranking member, that we don't see it happening if we simply say, thou shalt do it, but you'll do it by some sort of agreement with existing assets. Your comment?
Yep. So I understand that perspective. Obviously, I would bring a different perspective to the table in terms of our pace and our accomplishments. The point that I was raising was simply a suggestion that we look at different alternatives. You're in an environment where the President has been pretty clear. He submitted a proposal to Congress to give reorganization authority. We're looking for different ways to streamline government. So I think it's a worthy question to explore whether the types of accountability that you're looking for can be achieved through existing instruments and existing organizations within government. It may be so, maybe not. That's the type of dialogue we want to engage with you because of the importance we're placing on streamlining the complexity of government bureaucracy. Let me just add one more point. The other question I think is worth raising, again, without having monopoly on what the right answer is, but just a question worth raising. It has to do with what measures can we take within a bill like this to ensure that the impact and burden that is placed on the community, state and local governments as an example, universities, businesses that do work with the government, both small, medium, and large, what kind of measures can we put in place to make sure that we're balancing the important goal of transparency with the regulatory or information collection reporting burden that would be imposed on them as we advance this objective?
Sure. I appreciate that.
And that's the type of question that we'd want to explore.
And we look forward to working with you on it. My time's expired. I will say, of course, that although we fully paid for the DATA Act on this side, we're all aware that we're asking in very few cases for all new reporting. In almost every case, what we're doing is saying we're going to consolidate reporting so that if you do multiple reports, it actually gets easier than it is, because we're looking at not having to report in different formats to different agencies, which is one of the reasons for the DATA Act. And with that, I believe we go to the Chairman Emeritus for 5 minutes.
No, I don't think I'll take the full 5 minutes. First of all, Mr. Werfel. Okay. I think you've been a very good witness, and I appreciate your forthcoming. We invited Mr. Zients down, and for some reason he couldn't make it. And as I understand it, he is responsible for handling the IG portfolio for the White House. As I understand it, that he's the executive chairman of CIGIE and the President's liaison to the IG community. What I'd like to know is who makes the recommendations for new IGs to the President? I mean, somebody has to say to the President, and the reason I think we asked Mr. Zients to come up here is because he's charged with the responsibility of this coordination process. So I think that many of us thought that maybe he was the one, or somebody working with him was the one that made these recommendations to the President. Do you have any idea who makes the recommendations? Because I'm sure the President, with the vast bureaucracy we have, doesn't have time to go through everything and try to pick out somebody that's qualified. So somebody's making those recommendations. Do you know who that is?
Well, first of all, let me clarify, Congressman, that Mr. Zients.
Excuse me, Zients.
Yeah, no, Mr. Zients is not the official within the White House that makes recommendations to the President on filling IG vacancies. It's as the acting director and leader within the Office of Management and Budget, that is not within his set of responsibilities.
Who does? Do you know?
As I mentioned earlier, and I think as Ms. Fong testified, there's one of two ways, I think, in which recommendations can be made to the President. One is that the CIGI, the Council, has a process that was developed under the Inspector General Reform Act of 2008 to develop a list of potential qualified candidates for the President to consider. And then there is a Presidential Personnel Office within the White House, which recruits and explores a variety of different candidates for positions throughout government, including Inspector Generals, and they can identify candidates and make recommendations to the President as well. So there's a separate function within the White House that OMB is not involved in particular not with respect to Inspector Generals.
Since you and Mr.
Zients.
Since you folks work in the coordinating process between the various ones, you know when a new IG is taking office, and you know the process and everything else. Why? And I just don't understand this because I've never been a president, never been in the executive branch. When a president takes office, and this vast bureaucracy has to be filled with people who are appointed and being confirmed by the Senate, I would presume that organizations like CIGIE makes recommendations rather quickly so that the President can get on with his job of being the chief executive. I guess the thing I don't understand is how there could be a number of vacancies, whether it's under a Republican or a Democrat administration, that go on for, say, 3 or 4 years when these recommendations are made relatively soon after the President's sworn in. And I don't know if you can answer that or not, but it just seems to me that these recommendations are made by the Office of Personnel Management or OMB or whoever it is, or this organization, CIGI, relatively soon. So why is it that it takes so long for the President to make a recommendation to the Senate?
Again, I don't have the particular subject matter expertise or experience with respect to any given vacancy because I'm not involved in that role. What I will say—
Well, when you coordinate, and Mr. Zients coordinates between various IGs, he obviously is working with some who are acting and some who are permanent. If they're acting, I just wonder if there's any question that ever arises, why haven't we picked a permanent person for this and gotten it to the Senate for confirmation?
I have never raised that question, and I'm not aware, and I can't speak for Mr. Zients as whether he has. As I testified earlier, I have not and never experienced any diminution in the effectiveness of the IG, whether acting or not.
I guess my final question is, there's a list of people that are vetted, and they're recommended for various positions, like and they're presented to somebody, maybe it's the chief of staff at the White House, who says to the President, this is a guy that ought to fill this job over at State, and you don't know who that person is.
Me personally, I've never been consulted or asked regarding a particular IG.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's one of the things that we ought to find out at some point, who is making the recommendations to the President and why there isn't any action taken, especially after, a period of 2 or 3 years. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. With that, I yield to myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Werfel, welcome back again. Glad that you're here on that. And it is my same question on that. Why would we not try to press, whether it be OMB or the Executive Office, not try to go back and say, you know what, we haven't filled the post of the Secretary of State's IG ever. Been here 3.5 years. There's never been a nominee for that. The Interior position, if I remember that correctly, it was a month after the President took office. That went vacant. There's never been a nominee there. What's the process of acknowledging, hey, we've got a big hole here? Who then takes it from there to make sure that gets pressed, so that gets done?
Well, it's an interesting question. I feel like I can only speak for myself and my role at OMB, and I have a very particular focus with respect to the manner in which I interact with Inspector Generals. And believe me, I'm very busy, and the Inspector General community keeps me very busy in terms of identifying new areas for me to be coordinating across government. The mere fact and the practical reality is that as part of that footprint, it has not historically involved advising on candidates. In some measure,
Well, not just candidates, getting it done at all. And I'm not saying that your office would select the next person, just saying, hey, you know what, this has not been filled in 3.5 years. We probably should get a person. I mean, that is the watchdog for the organization. And the reason I bring it up, let me just mention a couple of things. When I was in Afghanistan last August, and we met with some folks from the State Department, we met with some folks from USAID, one of the things that came out immediately were some projects that are happening on the ground in Afghanistan. For instance, a hospital that was constructed that after they constructed, they said, you know what, this region needs a hospital. Then they determined we really don't have doctors or nurses to man this long term. We don't have a hospital administrator. So we spent millions and millions of dollars constructing a building in Afghanistan that now can't be used and that they can't transition it over, a power plant that can't be transitioned. And so they said we've now shifted our focus now from actually constructing to trying to just maintain what we've constructed. Well, that's really the job of an Inspector General to jump into the middle of it and say we have an enormous amount of waste that's happening by the millions of dollars in some of our USAID programs. We just had a hearing with the OGR 3 months ago discussing the human trafficking that's happening with the State Department and DOD. That is something uniquely the AG can rise up and say, you know what, in some of our embassies with State, we have employees there that are actually in debt bondage that we're bringing in from third world countries and that are coming into this spot. Now, no one denied it. It's just a matter of what do we do with that. Those are issues that we need an IG in place that can help go after that. The question becomes, that's out there. We know about those things. What do we not know about because we've never had a permanent IG in those areas? So it's the unknown. Obviously, you can't answer that either, but there's got to be someone to raise the flag to say, at some point, we've got to fill this position so that we have a watchdog in place. Let me just raise one other issue on it. The one that's surprising to me, and I have obvious concerns on USAID, and some of it's because of the strategy, the forward strategy that they have, and I'm sure that has no political ramifications for USAID to have a theme of forward. But for that program that's out there that intentionally is focused on transitioning money to other governments and to non-governmental organizations, 30% up of their budget. So now we have USAID that doesn't have an Inspector General transitioning 30% of its funds in its new forward program to people that don't have a watchdog. We're in trouble on that. We have a giant risk of an enormous amount of fraud and waste that's happening with no watchdogs now and 2 layers of that. Does that raise a red flag to you at all on that?
Actually, it does not. I wouldn't characterize it as a red flag, and here's why. Because I challenge the premise of the question that there's no watchdog. The Inspector General's office has been talked about throughout this hearing. There are thousands of civil servant, talented individuals that step in and often step in with great effectiveness in the event of the inevitable vacancies that occur. My work as controller at OMB focuses on a set of activities such as financial management, the financial statements, improper payments, internal controls, and from my reflection, I have not observed any reduction in effectiveness of the IG community. In fact, if anything, they're keeping us as busy as ever in terms of the aggressiveness of their approach. There was charts that showed the increasing nature of their investigations and their findings.
Due to the post office things, I noted that.
They're as effective as I've ever witnessed an IG community, and that's from the perspective that I have as controller in the terms of the specific areas that I focus on.
Right. I understand that. But I also hear every time that there's an issue that comes up in any department and it's a position that's being that the Senate is dragging their feet on confirmation, the first thing the other side of the aisle rises up and says is, you know what, this wouldn't be an issue if we had a permanent chair in that spot, if we had a permanent leader in that spot. This is a problem because we've never confirmed someone. And now the flip side of it, if no one's ever even been nominated, it's like, it's trickling along, it's doing fine. So in some ways, we're trying to have it both ways on this, trying to say when the Senate hasn't confirmed somebody, that's really the cause of this. Going back to things even like ATF, saying, you know, well, we've never had a permanent director there. We have all these problems with ATF because we've never had a permanent director. But now, if we don't have a permanent IG, well, that's fine. I just have a difficult time with that, looking at it both ways, and especially with areas with the USAID Forward program that's transitioning dollars even farther away from us. One other quick thought on it. I had a real concern on the transition of the Department of Interior, IG, that a month into the administration, that goes vacant. We're dealing with the BP oil spill. We're dealing with brand new regulations on fracking. We're dealing with Bureau of Land Management. We're dealing with some very controversial issues on how we handle the future of energy with the Department of Interior, and we have no permanent IG there. Do you know when there's going to be a proposal for a watchdog in an organization that much of our energy future is dependent on what happens in this entity?
Again, I'm not involved in that process, so I have no details.
Okay. With that, I'd like to yield to Mr. Micah.
Thank you, Mr. Werfel, and I'll yield myself remainder of the time here for some questions. How long have you been in your position?
I was confirmed by the Senate on October 13, 2009, to be the controller at OMB.
So you've been there pretty much since the beginning of the Obama administration?
Yes, and prior to that, I served as a civil servant within OMB as the deputy and acting controller, and I started my career at OMB in 1997.
And who do you report to?
Jeff Zients.
And what's his position?
He's the deputy director for management and currently the acting director.
But he is in an acting position.
That is correct.
Very, very frustrated with this administration in particular. We had former Chairman Burton just a few minutes ago and led this committee. I've been on it since I came to Congress now, I guess 19 going on 20 years, been through all kinds of administrations, Republican and Democrat. I do have to say this is the most difficult one we've ever had to deal with. The stonewalling is a great new art form with these folks. I chair the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and we have 6 subcommittees with broad jurisdiction, DOT, FAA, GSA, which has been on the news day and night. TSA isn't under our jurisdiction, but legislatively, but we conduct oversight there too. The other thing too is with the czars and some of these positions that aren't approved, it's made it doubly difficult to obtain information. Our side is, and the Founding Fathers wanted it this way. They wanted oversight. Actually, the Founding Fathers back in 1808 created this committee, the predecessor to this committee. It's an interesting history because they didn't trust the appropriators and they didn't trust the authorizers who created the programs. They wanted someone else to investigate, make certain that things went right. You have an important role, too, in making certain that there's proper financial management. Is that correct? And
yes, that is my role. I coordinate financial management policy across the government.
And since they don't cooperate and they stonewall us, it's been almost impossible to get information. The only recourse we've had is going to the Inspector Generals. And now I see when we have 10 vacancies and some of them, I guess there's 4 of them that might make some progress, I see why you wouldn't want to have permanent people in place who are getting information that could possibly be passed on to Congress. Doesn't that sound like it's a pattern of further impediment to the process? Because I've got 2 investigators here that I've sent out trying to get information. I've only been chairman for 14 months. I've never, I mean, Mr. Burton and I, we did Whitewater, we did Waco, we did Travelgate, we did every hearing you could possibly think of in this committee, because this is an important investigative committee of Congress. But never before have I ever seen an administration that not only will not give you the information, we have demanded time and time. I could give you copies in the last 14 months trying to get information. The GSA fiasco, we did the very first hearing in an empty building that sat empty 2 blocks from the White House, asked for information about their administrative expenditures. Mr. Denham, my subcommittee chairman, and I demanded at every public hearing and in writing information. Then what burns me is when the only way these people got caught was through the IG. And of course, we had Mr. Miller, the IG, and I wonder a little bit about that, because when they held this outrageous, GSA held the outrageous, lavish, taxpayer-funded fiasco in Las Vegas, it was reported by a former staffer of our committee that this was going on. The IG began an investigation. This occurred in October of 2010. It was reported to the IG in November. Mr. Miller went to work in May. He finished the report. He briefed GSA and other administration officials. In June, he briefed Kimberly Harris, counsel with the White House. Do you know Kimberly Harris?
I know Kimberly Harris, but I'm not aware of the particular communication.
Well, that's another thing. I'm wondering in this flow, your job is financial management, improving this. And did the IGs report back to you? Are you informed when there's waste, inefficiency, corruption, or any of the above?
As a general matter, I review IG reports.
Did you review the IG report for GSA?
I have read the IG report.
Did Mr. Miller bring it to you also in May or in June of last year?
No, he did not.
He did not. So it went to Kimberly Harris is what the information we got. Then nothing was done with it. We didn't see it. It was never given to us. Now I know why they only wanted to give us one line. They gave us one line. That was their total administrative cost. Now, of course, we're not the brightest people in the world, but we figured out if you are spending 300% more in 2.5 years, now that would be a financial management issue, wouldn't it be, Mr. Werfel, if you saw that increase in administrative expenditures?
I would.
It would light up a few lights. If it doesn't, then there's something wrong. Somebody doesn't have their lights on up here. But we're supposed to be protecting the taxpayers. You are an OMB in your position of financial management. So, one, there's something wrong if you know this person, if you're not getting the information. There's something wrong here. If, first of all, now, thank God we had Miller there. Now, Miller never turned over anything to us. It took the whistleblower, our former employee, to go to him, to Miller again, did it not? Are you aware of that? She went back to Miller and asked, after the guy snubbed his nose, held a convention, the investigation was done. Plenty of time to do an investigation we had from November to May. Adequate time to do an investigation on the funny business in Las Vegas. I think that was enough time. They informed the GSA administrator at the time and other officials. They never let us know. We kept asking questions, show us what's going on to warrant these expenses. Then only because this outrageous actor, who was a senior executive service employee, thumbs his nose at everybody, he decides to do, what was it, 17-day South Pacific vacation, Napa Valley. He picked the best locales. So he's off there, and she blows the whistle again. And so Miller does his investigation. This is with a IG in place. I'm not talking about how many agencies that don't have an IG in place. Folks, can you imagine what it's like out there when there's nobody minding the store? So this is a very, very serious business. And, You know, I think we need to even look at the law and making certain that
Would the gentleman yield?
No, not right now. I'm on a roll, but a little later.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I know you are on a roll, but
No,
we're still operating under the 5-minute rule here, are we not?
no, not right now. Did somebody set the clock on the Chairman?
You're clocking in at 8 minutes and 50 seconds, Mr. Chairman.
I'm on a second round. I just granted a second round. I'll grant you the same, sir. But
I don't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to make a point.
I'm trying to make some points here, and I can get some members to yield time. We can go through that routine. And I'll be glad to extend the courtesy to you or any Democrat members because I think it's fair. And I'm not trying to harass him, but I'm just trying to make a point here. Again, this is very difficult for us to get information, even when there is an IG, is my whole point. And Mr. Miller was then asked again to investigate. More of this funny business was reported, and the only way we found out about it was about a month ago when that report did become public. But I think, don't you think, Mr. Werfel, that you should, or somebody at OMB should have their lights turned on when these reports are done? If you're in charge of financial management, which you are, and I don't care whether it's President Obama, President Bush, Republican or Democrat, that's not the issue here. The issue is that something's not working. And I just sent these guys down to Texas, stonewalled again by TSA. And the only way we found out was through a whistleblower. The agencies give us information, and I sent the IGs down there, and if it wasn't for some of those guys intervening, and then this committee intervening, they told us they had 2,800 pieces of equipment. It turned out they had 5,700. They told us that they were taking care of the situation. Yes, our investigators are going in the front door. They're moving stuff out the back door, giving us a bogus report. So the Inspector General in every administration and this committee play an important role. And I think I want you to report back to the committee or OMB and let us know, would it be helpful? Should we put in the law that obviously we're not clicking here? I go back and people say, how can you let this go on? Well, it's very hard for me to explain. I'm trying to get the information. I can't get the information. There's not IGs in place to even help us. So you see the frustration. And we've got to do a better job. We've got to restore faith in this whole system. I mean, just in the last few weeks, my goodness, people just have lost faith in government. Do you see my point, Mr. Werfel? Again, I hope we can make something positive out of this hearing. If you need additional help to move these along, anything we can do, I'd be glad to do. Mr. Conley, did you seek recognition? And Mr. Conley is recognized for 11 minutes.
I promise, Mr. Chairman, I won't take that, and I thank you. I simply, well, first of all, let me ask you, Mr. Werfel, you're an OMB. Did the administration increase the budget for Inspector Generals?
What's gone on, in some cases, yes. So, for example, I mentioned earlier the State Department Inspector General budget has gone from roughly $59 million in 2011 to $66 million in 2013.
But, I mean, just looking at the global figure.
The global, it has increased. It certainly hasn't decreased in any meaningful way. We were at $2.6 billion for IGs in 2011, $2.7 billion for IGs in 2012, and roughly $2.7 billion is in the President's budget for 2013. Right. I think that's notable given that in just about every other area we're seeing significant cuts in discretionary programs, and there's clearly evidence of ensuring that the cuts are not hitting the IGs.
And I would simply point out that many of my friends on the other side of the aisle talk about government costing too much, but there are some investments that have a return on them. For example, we know that the additional resources being proposed for IG offices have a return on them, do they not?
Yeah, absolutely.
In recoverable funds, in lost, I mean, in increased efficiency, and in certainly uncovering waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yeah, and we saw statistics earlier in the hearing that pointed to particular savings and accomplishments.
Would that not also be true, for example, of the General Accounting Office?
Yes, the Government Accountability Office certainly has that type of impact in terms of having a positive.
This committee has received testimony that, as a matter of fact, the ratio goes as high as $91 for every new dollar invested in GAO in terms of recoverable amounts of money. And yet we had GAO testify here that in terms of overall size, GAO is down to a level that we haven't seen since 1935. And then a third agency I could cite, IRS. There's something like $400 billion of owed taxes on the table, not new taxes, not slashing investments, money that's ours, that's owed the American people, that is simply not collected for want of resources. We know that every dollar we invest in a new IRS agent has a direct return. Is that not true, Mr. Werfel?
Yeah, we have evidence of particular activities within the IRS who have a clear positive return on investment.
So it puzzles me sometimes that despite our rhetoric about wanting to reduce the debt and wanting to make sure that we get government right-sized, we're not willing to make the investments sometimes in proven entities that can recover either lost revenue or avoid inefficiencies and improper payments. You've testified before us many times, for example, on the improper payment issue. Very little pain associated with that, huge payoff. Final point I want to make is, and then I will yield back, Mr. Chairman, but the Chairman talked about GSA. I do not share the clarity of the Chairman about some of the conversations he cited with respect to the White House and Mr. Miller. A passing reference, have you seen an IG report, or the IG report, hardly means, or is to be construed as, recognition that full knowledge was made available. But I will point out, we had the IG from GSA here. We had the outgoing administrator who fell on her sword and resigned as a matter of honor after firing 2 deputies and putting a lot of other people on probation. But the testimony we heard from the IG of GSA was that he didn't uncover this excess. Susan Britta, the deputy to the administrator, Martha Johnson, uncovered it. She's the one who referred it to the IG. And I asked in questioning here, the IG's been there since 2005, in place. He heard no evil, saw no evil, smelled no evil, found no evil, even though we know that this excessive celebration event preceded this administration and continued in this administration. But it wasn't the IG with 300 personnel at his command. He didn't find this at all, only when the administrative staff referred it to him. And then it took him 9 months to come up with a report that, frankly, I think almost anyone, even on this panel, could have written in half the time. So, yeah, having an IG is important, but I don't know that the IG is entirely the heroic figure sometimes painted in this particular case. I think this, if he was doing his job, he could have uncovered this years before and maybe avoided the embarrassment in the situation. In any event, it was the appointed administrator and her staff that uncovered that excess, referred it properly to him, and he was able to investigate that. Is that your understanding as well, Mr. Werfel?
I wouldn't call myself an expert on all the moving pieces, but it is my understanding that that in this particular case, the deputy administrator referred the issue for further IG investigation. And if I could, I just want to make a broader comment about OMB's role in Inspector General reports in response to both your questions and Congressman Mica's. We take IG findings in their reports extremely seriously, in particular those that affect financial management. We work with other Federal agencies. Part of our role is to bring, for example, chief financial officers and other members of the community together to understand what is going on in IG reports across government, what we can learn from them. The GSA report is no different. We need to understand better what happened so we can prevent it from happening again, and we need to explore with the broader community what steps we can take to fix the issue and make government better going forward. That's the basic role that OMB has with respect to IG reports, and I think it's a very critical one and one that we have fostered a very strong relationship with Ms. Fong and other IGs around that shared mission of better government.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the time.
Well, thank you. And I do want to try to conclude the hearing today, but I did, again, have this information that was provided on our witness. It says Danny Werfel is the controller of the Office of Federal Financial Management within the Office of Management and Budget. He is responsible for coordinating OMB's efforts to initiate government-wide improvements in all areas of financial management. And again, I used a GSA example, and we did, in fact, have a former staffer who works at GSA blow the whistle. An investigation was conducted, and properly so. A report that started in November after the after the October incident in 2010. In May, GSA and others were informed, administrators. We had the witnesses here. Nothing was done. In June, the White House was advised. You said you knew the counsel but didn't know the incident or didn't read the report. My whole point is here was these were very serious allegations of abusive use of taxpayer dollars. Okay, so it's reported. Nothing's done. The guy takes off and launches another wasteful scenario. And Susan Britta again blows the whistle, and the Inspector General begins an investigation. But somehow all of the cylinders don't seem to be clicking, and you say you just got through testifying to the gentleman from Virginia that you get these reports and they're taken seriously. And my questioning was, do we require, is this required? Maybe we should require that this goes to OMB and to you all. I guess you're just doing this as a matter of course. What I'm trying to do is get things to click so that some action is taken. That had the potential, I think, even at that stage for some criminal referrals. I don't know all the details on it, but please, when it comes to initiating government-wide improvements of all areas of financial management, you got an agency spending money like that, it raises question. And that, my point was, with an Inspector General in place. But here we've got other agencies, at least a half a dozen, and we have some with 1,000 days. That's 3 years, nearly 4 years, 4 years with the State Department, huge operations without somebody in charge on a permanent basis. I deal with acting administrators, and I'm telling you, it's difficult. I've got one right now in FAA, and got a tough situation there. So my point is not to give you a hard time, maybe a little bit, but to see how we can improve this whole process, make certain you have the tools. I have no problem with giving you additional funds, and it was testified you're going from 2.6 to 2.7 billion, and that's fine. You have a good rate of return when you're doing your job. It's $18 return on a dollar spent, I believe. So I could double the money if I could get more money. Benefits back and better management, cut the debt and spending for the taxpayer. So that's my point today. And we do have an important responsibility here, because sometimes the authorizers don't get it right. Sometimes the appropriators just spend money and don't get it right. We're that third entity that the Founding Fathers, to make certain. you look at other governments, they have somewhat of our similar structure, but none of them have, again, this filter like our committee that keeps going after waste, fraud, and abuse, which is so important in keeping the system straight and making it work better and more efficiently. So with that commentary, I thank you for your participation. I would like you to also provide the committee with additional information. We'll be sending you a written request, and I wish you would respond. Are we leaving the record open here? Has there already been a? Okay, and so the record will be left open for additional comments and response. With that being said, and I see no further members here, the House Government Reform and Oversight Committee will stand adjourned, and I thank our witnesses for taking time to appear before us today. This committee stands adjourned.